Your Honor. Good morning, Detective Wheeler.
Morning.
Could you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Detective Eric Wheeler, ERIC, WHEELER.
Thank you. And can you please explain to the jury, where do you work?
The Rexburg Police Department.
How long have you worked there?
18 years.
And what's your current rank?
Detective.
And what was your rank prior to becoming detective?
Patrol sergeant.
And how long were you a patrol sergeant?
Approximately 3 or 4 years.
And how long have you been a detective now?
3 years.
So prior to that, were you a patrol officer?
Yes, sir.
And just very briefly, for the jury's sake, will you please explain to them what's the basic post-training that law enforcement receives?
So I've received my advanced and master certificate through Idaho Post, and so it's training that you have to go through, in-service type training. You have to go through the Post Academy to get your basic certificate, and it entails everything from traffic, criminal code, search and seizure, laws of arrest techniques, firearms, those sort of things.
Thank you. And I want to draw your attention almost 5 years ago, back to June 9th of 2020. Were you involved in any kind of search that occurred in Fremont County?
Yes, I was.
What search was that?
It was the search warrant that we were asked to help with at 202 North, 1900 East, Fremont County, Chad Daybell property.
And what was the subject of the search?
My role in the search was to maintain scene security, safety, traffic and crowd control while investigators conducted the search on the property.
And just briefly, help the jury understand more. Why do law enforcement need to maintain safety and security at a search scene?
Anytime we're doing a search on anybody's property or home, there's a risk that's an inherent risk to the officers as they're conducting that search. And so whether that's agitated bystanders or the homeowners themselves. And so we just like to keep everybody safe by maintaining that control.
And we'll come back to your role in that capacity, but I want to fast forward a bit. Ultimately, did you help find anything on the property as part of that search?
Yes.
What did you find?
I found remains of Tylee, and then I observed the remains of JJ.
And very briefly, can you explain to the jury before we go back, describe where those remains were found for each of them relative to the property?
Judge, I probably need a little bit more foundation.
He was present at the scene. He just said he observed this on the same date.
Overruled. So JJ was located by the pond area of the property, and Tylee was found near a fire pit just east of the property.
And for the jury's sake, relative to the home on the property, where are the fire pit and where are the pond?
So the fire pit's east of the residence, and the pond is northeast of the residence.
Would that be in the front of the property, the back of the property, the side?
The rear of the property.
So I'd like to come back now to your role in safety. So can you be specific with what you were assigned to do in that role as the search when you arrived?
So when we arrived, I helped maintain traffic as they were in the process of closing the road down in front of the house because multiple vehicles were going to be showing up. So I helped maintain some traffic control at the beginning. And then I stood by as detectives went and served that warrant to the occupants inside the home. And then my role was to just stand by and observe the occupants and their coming and goings as they were free to move around as they wanted.
And is that common in a search until something's found? Are the occupants allowed to remain on the property and sometimes move around?
Yes.
Prior to beginning your role on the search, did you have the opportunity to identify Chad Daybell?
Yes.
How did you do that?
Prior to this, just through investigation, through tips that we were receiving, even in patrol, we were helping field multiple tips that would come into the agency as we were looking for the children. And so through that investigation, I'd seen multiple pictures and images of Chad Daybell.
So is it fair to say that on June 9th that you were capable of identifying Mr. Daybell when you did?
Yes.
When you took your role, when's the first time that, let me withdraw that. Can you tell the jury what time of day, the best you can recall, that you arrived on scene to help with the search?
We arrived to the residence, I believe I got there just after 7 a.m. on the 9th.
And can you also let the jury know, were there other law enforcement agencies involved?
Yes, there were multiple law enforcement agencies involved.
Could you just briefly identify which agencies that were present?
The ones that I knew were present at that time were the Rexburg Police Department, the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI.
Were there a large number of law enforcement present? Or a
Yes.
small number?
Yes.
So when you arrived, you were given this assignment. Please recall and then explain to the jury, when's the first time that you personally got eyes on Chad Daybell?
So it was approximately 7:30 when I observed him leave the residence and walk over to his vehicle that was parked on the back driveway, the east side of his home. He got in the vehicle and then moved his vehicle over to the west driveway area and backed his car into that driveway on the west side of the house.
And if I could have you explain to the jury, Detective Wheeler, when he moved the car to the west side driveway, can you explain to the jury what would his vantage point have been relative to the pond and the fire pit?
He may have been able to see the pond area a little better from that west front driveway where he moved the vehicle to.
And so once he moved the vehicle, what, if anything, did you observe him to do?
He sat in his vehicle and was on the phone for quite some time. Just sat there in his vehicle.
So as you saw him in the vehicle making phone calls, while he was doing that, what's the next thing that you remember he did?
So I remember there were multiple times that I could, because I was trying to keep eyes on him as well as the west side, the front part of the house. And there were multiple times I kind of saw him awkwardly looking over his right shoulder towards that east or that northeast corner of the property where the pond area was. And that's at that time where some of the investigators and cadaver dogs were working.
And you just used the word awkwardly. Can you explain to the jury what you meant by awkwardly and what indicated to you that he was awkward?
The best way I can explain it is that for somebody to look over their right shoulder for, a long period of time. And the reason I use awkwardly is because there was one time that he did exit the vehicle and kind of walked towards the rear of his vehicle and looked in that direction. And that's when I figured that he was interested or suspicious of something going on in that area. And I had made note to one of the other officers that was close by of that behavior.
And so when he got out and walked to the rear of the vehicle, based on your observation, would that have improved his vantage point back to the pond?
Yes.
What did he do next after he got out and walked to the rear of the vehicle?
So he got out, walked to the rear, kind of passenger side a little farther on the passenger side of his vehicle, looked around for just briefly, and then got back in his vehicle.
What did he do next?
I believe he was on the phone for just a little bit longer, and then he drove over to Kitty Corner to his residence where his daughter was staying.
Were you aware that that was his daughter's home at that time?
Yes.
Which daughter?
I believe it was Emma.
What did he do when he drove over there?
I know that he had a conversation briefly outside and then had eventually gone into the home.
I assume, could you see him while he was inside the home?
I couldn't see him while he was in the home, no.
How long do you recall him being in the home?
Approximately an hour, hour and a half, maybe.
Eventually, did you see him come out?
Yes.
What did he do when he left that home?
I, again, was occasionally looking over to see if he was leaving or was needing anything and coming back to ask questions. And so I would look over there, and one of the times I did, I was talking to another detective, and he came out of the home and appeared to be in a hurry. He went directly from the home to his car, had some items in his hand, and then left the property. And I remember at that time that there were assigned detectives responsible for following him if he went certain places and just kind of keeping an eye on him. And so Detective Schmidt was one of those detectives. And so I mentioned to him, hey, Chad's leaving. And about that time, other investigators that were in the back of the property came jogging over saying, hurry and go stop him.
When you said leaving, did he leave on foot?
Sorry, so he got inside of his vehicle and drove going south. And I do remember the accelerating, you could hear the acceleration. And I thought, is he trying to run? I remember that was a thought that went to my mind. And then when the other detectives said, hurry, go stop him, where I was in a marked vehicle, I responded to that request.
In your experience as a law enforcement officer, is it common for someone who is the subject of a search at a home when they believe something is going to be found or is being found?
Judge, I'm going to object. This calls for speculation.
It's training and experience, Your Honor.
Judge, no, this is,
Hold, Mr. Wixom, first of all, if there's an objection, let me think about it for a minute and respond before you start arguing against the objection. So please also for the court reporter, at this time, I am going to sustain that objection.
So you went and stopped him. Can you describe to the jury, you said he was, in your opinion, going fast, is that right?
Correct.
How far away from the home approximately was he before he was stopped?
It was right around the Fremont-Madison County line where he stopped. I couldn't give you an exact distance.
Did you make any personal contact with him when he stopped?
I did.
And what did he say or do?
So at the time, all I had was a request to stop him. I hadn't gathered any further information. The other detectives that had made that request were right behind me. And so I exited my vehicle and asked Chad to exit his vehicle and explained to him that that I had been asked to stop him and that the detectives were on their way to talk to him.
At that particular point, did you notice any change in his demeanor at all?
He didn't ask any questions, wasn't way shocked or surprised that he got stopped, and complied to the requests that I asked of him.
At that point in time, did any other law enforcement become involved in contact with him?
Yes.
Who was it that you recall?
At the time, his rank was Lieutenant Ball and then Detective Hermosillo. And there were a few other officers. I don't necessarily know their names or who they were that were at the stop.
Now, asking you to recount for us, what was the first thing that you remember law enforcement telling him?
So
Judge, I'm going to object.
Grounds,
It's hearsay.
sustain.
Judge, may I argue that?
Go ahead.
It's not offered to prove the truth, Your Honor. It's just the effect on listener, which would have been Chad.
Well, but the point you brought up in the question, what was the first thing you remember law enforcement telling him? So I think it's just directly calling for hearsay. So it is sustained.
Was there some interaction?
yes,
Once that interaction occurred, were you ever instructed or did you ever take it upon yourself to arrest Chad?
I placed handcuffs on Chad.
And what did you do with him once handcuffs were placed upon him?
He was told that he was being detained right now, and He complied. I correctly put the handcuffs on, checked for proper tightness, double locked them, and then put him in my patrol vehicle.
During that interaction, are you aware, was he ever advised whether or not there'd been a find on the property?
Yes,
What was he advised?
that they had found JJ.
So in your vehicle, do you have camera system?
Yes,
Is there any camera system inside of the vehicle itself?
yes. We have 3 different cameras that are linked together. One is inside where we put our prisoners, and then one is the dash cam, and then the one we wear, which is our body cam.
The one inside where you put your prisoners, what do you refer to that as?
The in-car camera.